Not really sure where to go with this one, but we're going. So recently I was asked about incels, and what that is, if you don't know, the involuntary celibate movement, group, community, whatever you want to call it, which I do not know a lot about, and I'll probably get a ton wrong about it. But I was asked this by somebody who I've been talking to who is an incel, who's somebody who's involuntarily celibate. He has Asperger's or autism. We've talked a little bit online, and you know what? I like talking to him because, I love talking to people, especially when they want to work on themselves. Now, in this whole time, we've also had a couple of shootings that have happened in the US, which I consider tragedies. I hate that. I do not like that. And it's something that, of course, we as a country and a community, I feel we should solve. That whole thing goes in so many different directions, but fundamentally, there are unhappy people in this world, and they're unhappy for a reason. And according to my friend in England, who is an incel, who asked me about this question, is that within this incel community, and I could get this wrong, that these types of tragedies or these types of shootings can be celebrated. That somehow they work as an anthem of the rage and frustration of one person communicating with the world. And I want to take a step back from this for a second, because I don't want this to be a political thing. I don't want this to be anything about encouraging that sort of behavior. I don't want this to be anything of saying that this is good. But what I do want this to be about is giving a voice to people who almost feel they can't speak. So I work with men a lot. I also work with men in addiction a lot. And this type of anger or rage towards the world is common, especially when you get into the world of addiction. Now, in the world of addiction, usually the addict destroys himself before he goes and destroys other people. But it's very common within the world of addiction to have somebody want to take out their rage and pain on society and a community. The fact of the matter is, though, it statistically doesn't happen much, mainly because drugs, addiction implodes somebody in such a way that you can't really organize that sort of thing. So when it comes to this phenomenon that has been happening, and we say with white American males, but we see the same phenomenon in jihad, we see the same phenomenon in heavy social, religious movements of somebody without an identity who doesn't feel a part of this world, who doesn't have anything to connect upon, who doesn't have sex. Turn that into rage and see the answer in martyrdom and giving pain to innocent people as something which feels good. And again, I want to stay away from how wrong that is, which I agree it's wrong, because I want to address people where they're at who may have this sort of rage. And I do know from addiction, one of the biggest things is that a lot of addicts, not all of them, come into recovery hating the world, wishing death on people, wanting to make people pay for their pain, because the pain that they felt, whether that came from their family members, people on the street, traumas and tragedies that happened to them over and over again repetitiously in their life, which has also happened to me to some degree, but I know people who've had way, way worse. They want to take that out on the community or the metaphor of society which represents all of that. Meaning that the people across the street from where I'm at in downtown Austin somehow represent the social world and culture that had me on the street getting the shit beat out of me, being raped, being belittled, isolated, and alienated from the world. And I want to carry that message because I was the metaphor for them. Meaning the pain that I felt from the world outside of me, especially because addiction is so about self-obsession and blame in society, that I need to now take out my pain on the world that saw me as a metaphor that they could not care about. And in my opinion, this is a huge, huge issue, but when we get to the individual that is feeling these feelings and has not yet picked up a gun or planned the next school shooting or whatever, we need to talk to them about that. Because what I know from addiction is guys come in with that, and I get it, addicts just destroy themselves too quickly to be able to pull off something like that, but many of them want it. What heals them is to be able to talk about it, is to be able to accept them for where they're at right now and get around other people who may have felt that way and have overcome it. Now let's jump to the whole incel thing. And see, the thing about incels is we get a group of men who have it extremely problematic to meet women. Again, I don't know all the details of it, but if you're black pill or red pill or whatever the hell it is, basically the idea is that because you were born a certain way, you're just never going to be successful with women, and the Chads and Stacys of the world get everything social that you don't want. See, here's one of the things is when you're starving sexually, when you're starving emotionally, what you think is satisfaction in terms of emotional fulfillment, which is an urge that you want, in terms of sexual fulfillment, in terms of relationship fulfillment, which are all urges that you want, are distorted. So that when you are hungry, when you want to eat, when you want to get laid, when you want to have sex, when you want to have a woman touch you, when you want to be caressed, when you want to share a life with somebody, you just see what the world has around you, but you're starving and in pain, and what you think is good is all screwed up. That your lack of experience, or perhaps your inability to get that experience, filters you in a place where it's just complete distortion of what you want in terms of reality. Where this comes into play is that then if our motive is sexual, we start thinking that TV and when we see rock stars get laid or whatever is our way to get laid. And the pickup community totally screwed this up for so many men. This is why things like PUA hate came about. This is why things like the red pill came about. Whereas it plays so much to men's pain and desperation, and although some of it might be true, the end goal is wrong. And the end result is usually anger and frustration, control, power, lack of empathy, all the things that every pretty much major religion disagrees with as a good thing. So one of the solutions for this comes actually from a friend of mine who went MGTOW. He was one of the greatest geniuses that I know about seduction and social dynamics. He's up there with Hans Komain, Zan Perion. He was someone that I had so much fortune to live with in Austin and go through this experience in seduction, because back in 2009 or 10 and even 7 and 8 when I knew him, there weren't people who could talk from the experiences that he had and the love for women and all these different things. And all of us back then in the seduction community were a little bit crazy. Like I said, I've had my addiction issues and he had his issues. But the interesting thing that happened is, he fell in love with somebody, much as I fell in love with somebody. And it didn't go right. And he got screwed over and he got totally fucked. He got screwed emotionally, he got screwed financially, he didn't really have his family to lean on, and he ended up in a very bad spot. And he went full into MGTOW, which is men go their own way. And I remember picking him up when he was homeless and he had finally reached out to me in whatever it was, 2017 or 18. And I just couldn't believe it. Because back in 2009, this man said to me, he said, "Steve, if you are not having sex, you cannot be yourself. If you are not having sex, you cannot be mentally and emotionally stable." And now he meant this as an absolute truth, that if you couldn't express yourself and if it couldn't be felt by another human being and reciprocated and seeing the value of one, empathy, but also seduction in your sex, then you could not get any sort of footing of self. You could not get any sort of sanity. And that if you could not have sex, that you had to make your first step be sexual. Now, you could argue that point. I've coached a lot. Sometimes that isn't the best thing to do. But what he's actually saying is that getting sexual allows us to open up in a certain area, in a certain way. And if I had an answer for the incel community, which I know very little about, I don't get much, and I've just talked to this gentleman. I have a lot of experience in sex and dating. I have a lot of experience with guys who have autism and Asperger's, who want to date. I have a lot of experience with people who are recovering PUAs or red pill guys or just normal guys. But for whatever the incel community is, it seems a little bit different from what I may used to and be used to, but I just don't want to misrepresent it or get it wrong. But I think number one, there needs to be a voicing and expression that community can communicate that is healthy, not hurting people or causing more mass shootings. Don't get me wrong. I think the frustration should be talked about. I think it should be talked about amongst people who have gotten past it and found a peace in their life. If we could find those people that were involuntary celibates or still are, that could move in that certain direction. I also think that there needs to be a variety of ways, not just getting a hooker or getting some sort of cheap sex, but maybe it could be that. of where guys could start to get sexual fulfillment, to get on the map, so you could have a point of reference of what sex is, what social communication is, and what human communication is. Because when you take the black pill, so to speak, and say it's just impossible and I can't do it, you then cut out all the potential of who you are. And what I know is every single human being does have the potential for sex. The reason why you have an urge for sex that's so overwhelmingly frustrating, that makes you hate all the Chads and Stacys out there, is because you have a massive urge to want to do this. In that massive urge, you also have an ability for it to be done. Now, one of the things that I hear from, well, we'll say some incels, and again, I don't really know, there seems to be a heavy emphasis and being particular about who and what you have sex with, whether that's around race, whether that's around a certain type of person, whether they have to have a certain status or look or whatever. This is the same thing that happens with all normal guys when they're not having sex. See, when we are having sex, we are much more open, and we can be like, man, that girl's not my type, but it could be good sex or whatever. We're just so much more open to different women, and we definitely have a taste and a preference, and we love those things and go for it. But good sex isn't necessarily based on it being a brunette or a blonde or big tits or nice ass or small tits or whatever the particulars are of those different tastes. Good sex is dependent upon the communication and connection. Now, those things, those attributes are still good. They're great. I don't want to downplay them. But when we're not having sex, we tend to go like, oh, it has to be a blonde, or it has to be a brunette, or it has to be a redhead. Her hip size needs to be this, or else I'm just not going to be satisfied. And our sex becomes this over-compartmentalized thing, which is logically mapped out in our brain and not felt in our body and our hearts and our emotions. And so that's another interesting thing. We need to get on the map emotionally, mentally, sexually, and all those different things. That being said, we don't just need to get functional with sex. We need to get functional with how we emote and how we communicate with other people. We need friends. And this is something that's huge in recovery. And this is why, to me, in the different veins of recovery that I practice and do and volunteer with and so on, they all revolve around fellowship, and fellowship is huge. Whether that's somebody who's in a 12-step realm, or that's somebody who did Ibogaine and decided to go into some tribal community. Fellowship is such a massive part of it. You need to be around people, and you need to be around people that you understand and can understand you. Empathy cures so much frustration and rage and pain. And it's just nuts. I mean, man, even I've had a lot of problems personally in my life lately. And what do? I pick up the phone. I pick up the phone and I talk to people because that cuts it down. My actions make me insane. My isolation makes me insane. But when my brain is a little bit off, it always tells me I can do it. I don't need people. I need to be on my own. That's the best answer. And then whatever action that is fueled and produced by my pain, I say I have to do. Whenever I do that, life doesn't work out for me. Whenever I do the opposite of that and communicate with other people and kind of integrate and find a peace and have some open-mindedness, which is a practice, which is an action, which is a lot harder than just flipping a switch, my life gets great. So yeah, that's all I got to say on it. Hopefully we didn't make anybody too mad, and hopefully we can build more of a dialogue and not some dramatic ranting in a comment section or hate-fueled stuff. And I'm not expecting to come up with a solution for this, but I want to come up with a solution for the person in front of me talking to me, and so that our lives could be happy. All right. Thumbs up, like it. Hey, come by Austin Men's Development, guys. This is what we do. We have live local meetups here in Austin every Thursday night at 7 p.m. That membership is amazing. That's the MDX ATX Austin Locals. We also have an international version where anywhere in the world, if you have an internet connection, you can get involved in 30 hours of calls a week. You don't have to be on all of them, but we have those slots open where you get direct coaching from me and a bunch of other guys, and it's an awesome community, as well as Facebook groups, content, material, courses, all sorts of good stuff. But if you don't want to pay anything, check out the free Facebook group and see if you like it. All right, we'll talk to you guys soon.